Hi, or should I say, oi, tudo bem? Huh? Tudo bem? Yeah? Good, good. Before I begin my talk, I just wanted to say that it's a privilege to be here. And thank you so much, Natalie, and the entire team at TEDx for making this happen. It's really an honor to be in front of you. And today, I'm going to talk about two beliefs that I have, two uncommon beliefs. One is that the world today is in a better state than it's ever been before. And the second uncommon belief is that this next generation of entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs, I believe, will exercise humility more than anything, and that's what I'll be talking about. So, a confession, I'm a business school dropout. I studied philosophy, and there's one thing that I did learn in my advertising class, though, and it's that there's three things that sell in advertising. It's sex, children, and puppies. And the key here is never to mix the first one with the second two. So I'm an optimist, and I wanted to get a picture of a puppy, so I Googled optimistic puppy, and this is what showed up. And the reason I'm an optimist is because I do believe that the world is in a better state than it's ever been before. Right? If we look at the numbers, the amount of literate people in the world has doubled in the last 40 years. Since 1970, the number of democratic nations on this planet has tripled, right, to over 110. And when we look at life expectancy, it's doubled since the turn of this last century. I really do believe that the world's better off than it's ever been before. But when I tell my friends this and I tell my parents this, they say I'm a naive optimist. And I say, no, I'm an impatient optimist. Because although the world is better than it's ever been before, it's not good enough. The issues we face today are massive. We know them. Right? There's over 1 billion people living in absolute poverty. There's another 1 billion people without access to clean drinking water. We live in a world today where children under the age of 5 die from preventable diseases like malaria, 2.3 million of them every single year. The world may be better than it's ever been before, but it's not good enough. And so when I realized this, and I was younger, I wanted to figure out how could we find solutions to these issues, right? And when I did research and I talked to people, this was the answer I was often shown. I don't know if you can see the cartoon. It shows a really complicated problem and then a solution on the other side, and in the middle, it says then a miracle occurs, right? And when we look at solutions to the world's greatest problems, oftentimes we leave it up to miracles. We leave it up to individuals who are on the fringes of human capability and human potential, right? The Mahatma Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, the Nelson Mandelas, and the Rosa Parks of our world. And to me, leaving the solutions to our issues up to miracles is not good enough. The stakes are too high. And so I set out to try to find a leverage point in society where we could really have some power, we could really have some influence. And about 7 years ago, I read an essay that really changed how I thought. And this essay had a theory. It said that the tallest building in the center of any city is where the power dynamics of that society lie. This is especially true for Western Europe. So if we go back in time, we go to the 17th century, if we look at any city in Western Europe, the tallest building was the church, right? The church was at the center of any city. And the church guided the ethical, the political, and the human code of that day, right? Wars were fought over religion. There was no separation between church and state. It was the Holy Roman Empire. And if you disobeyed the laws of the Bible, you didn't just get kicked out of that state. You got excommunicated from heaven. Well, if we fast forward 200 years to the latter part of the 18th century, there was a big dynamic switch in terms of power across Europe. And the tallest building in the center of any city was no longer the church. It became the state. Right? It became Parliament. It became Westminster Abbey. It became the governmental building. And the code of ethics of the day changed. And it changed from the Bible to the Constitution. It became we the people, for the people, by the people. Wars were fought by nations for nationalism, not for religion. Today, if you go to any city in the world and you look at the center of that city, what's the tallest building? Right? Today, it's business. It's finance, it's commerce. The ethical code that guides us is capitalism. And so I used to believe that business was the answer to changing the issues that we face and transforming them, but actually I think that theory is debunked. And for the first time in the history of humankind, the power dynamics are no longer rest at the tallest city in the center of any building. Instead, it's at our fingertips. Right? It's been democratized, it's been decentralized because of things like the web, because of cell phones, because of social media. For the first time ever, the tallest building is not who has the power, it's the individual. Collectively and individually, we can have that power. And this is why I love entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurs have known this all along. And in fact, the word entrepreneurship, it's French, which is why it's so hard to spell. But at its root, it means to take into one's own hands. Right? Entrepreneurs, they've known this all along. And so when people ask me why I'm an optimist, it's because I believe in entrepreneurs, and I believe in the future of entrepreneurs to take these issues into their own hands and transform them into opportunities. Now, of course, I didn't just come up with this idea, and in fact, it's been about 8 years in the working, and I've only been able to articulate it about 3 months ago. I'm still working on it. But really, the story for me begins with something called the Unreasonable Institute. And the Unreasonable Institute is really inspired by this guy. This is George Bernard Shaw. We refer to him as our patron saint of the Institute because he has a quote. He said that the reasonable man adapts himself to the world, the unreasonable one persists in adapting the world to himself. Therefore, all progress is dependent on the unreasonable man. Right? If we live in a world where the issues are so high, we cannot afford not to bet on unreasonable people, and this is what we're dedicated to at the Institute. This is our business model. This is everything that we do at the Unreasonable Institute. To say it simply, we're an international accelerator for the next generation of entrepreneurs. We try to accelerate the growth of companies that are leveraging business to have a social or environmental impact. And we do this through mentorship. We don't actually have a curriculum. We bring out 50 to 60 mentors, and we match them up with our entrepreneurs. So this past summer, we had 26 entrepreneurs who joined us in Colorado for 6 weeks. They were coming from 17 countries, working with smallholder rural farmers in Nigeria, on ultra-affordable DNA diagnostic devices for preventable disease in Argentina, on reality shows about social injustice in Afghanistan. Right? These entrepreneurs, they were incredibly diverse. They came together, though, for 6 weeks with us, and they lived with mentors. And so we bring out these 50 to 60 mentors from incredible people like the CTO of the largest IT company in the entire world, the former head of global brand and marketing at Coca-Cola, co-founder of Google.org, another entrepreneur who's attributed for taking over 20 million people out of poverty. And these mentors, they live with their entrepreneurs. But we also believe that mentorship isn't the only critical component. We also need access to capital. So we've partnered with 30 venture capital funds who are focused on these markets, on emerging markets. And these investors come, they live with the entrepreneurs as well. So our secret sauce is no secret. It's that we put everybody under the same roof in the same house for 6 weeks. This is actually a picture. It was taken just shy of 3 a.m. on a Wednesday night. And the Institute is always like this. If you walk in through the front door, the entrepreneurial energy, it's in the air, it's in the ether, it's palpable. You live for it. And the entrepreneurs, they're working all the time. They're working with each other, with these mentors. And over time, they develop what we call uncommon productive collisions. So if you can imagine waking up one morning and having breakfast with an entrepreneur Tom Settis, who's launched 19 companies, raised over $2 billion. And then you have a conversation with one of our entrepreneurs, Moses Sanga, who comes out of a rural village in Uganda. He started his business with $100. And then for lunch, you sit down and you have a meeting with another entrepreneur who's leveraging a biotechnology in India to diagnose anemia, and then another one who's using cell phones as mobile banking in Kenya. Right? Times that by 10 interactions, and that's a day in the Institute. You can imagine what comes from 6 weeks for us. Now, everybody always asks us, how do we select our entrepreneurs? What do we look for in the entrepreneurs that we work with? And this is what I really wanted to talk to you about, is we look for a paradoxical blend of confidence and humility. And so for this talk, I'd like to focus on humility. When we talk about this blend, we say that we want entrepreneurs who have enough confidence that they're going to persist through failure. Right? They have enough confidence to ignore the skeptics. They have enough confidence to fail, and then succeed. Right? But they also have enough humility to listen to their markets. They have enough humility to listen to their customers and be agile, to reinvent and recreate their businesses over and over and over again, because they care more about addressing the solution than they do about their business model itself. And when I tell people that we look for humility in entrepreneurs, most people don't understand it. And they ask me, bless you, they ask me, why would you select for humility? What is humility? And so I'd like to, in the spirit of entrepreneurship, walk you through 2 quick thought experiments on what humility is, and maybe we can arrive at a definition. The first one, there we go. The first thought experiment I'd like to talk about was really brought up by this man. This is Sir Ken Robinson. He actually has the most viewed TED Talk in the history of TED. And he gave a talk on creativity and education. In that talk, he cited a study about creativity and education. And it was about this UK researcher who went to the United States, and he went into a classroom of first graders and then into a classroom of 10th graders. So a bunch of 9-year-olds and then 16-year-olds, and he wanted to see if there was any difference in their creative spirit between those classes. Right? So he walks into the first grade classroom, gets in front of the students, and he says, hey, I'm a researcher from the UK. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I'm hoping you can answer them. So all the students in the first grade classroom, they're like, okay, great. And he goes, who here can draw? Right? And all the kids, they go, I can draw, I'm the best. And he hands out all these crayons and papers, and the kids start to draw. And then he asks, he goes, okay, that's great. I have a second question for you. Who here can sing? Right? And all of a sudden, the entire classroom explodes. All the first graders, they're all singing at the top of their lungs. They're serenading each other. They're showing off. They're having so much fun. And he says, stop. My most important question, is who here can dance? Right? Classroom explodes. They all jump up on their chairs, on their desks. They're dancing. They're wiggling about. And he goes, great. Thank you very much. Right? He walks out of the first grade classroom. He then walks down the hall across the school. He finds a 10th grade classroom. He walks into the 10th grade classroom. He does the same thing. He says, hey, I'm a researcher from the UK. I'm here to ask you 3 questions. I'm hoping you will answer them. The students say, okay. And he goes, who here can draw? Right? Who here can draw? And 2 kids out of 25 in the class, they raise their hand. They say, yeah, I can draw. I'm an art student, right? I can draw. He goes, okay. I have a more important question here. Who here can sing, right? 1 student, 1 girl in that classroom says she can sing. And he goes, okay, that's fine. My last question, most important, is who here can dance? Nobody raises their hand. And in fact, nobody even looks at the professor. They keep their eye contact down. So my question here is, and we'll come back to it, is are those 10th graders, the ones who say they can't draw, that they can't dance, they can't sing, are they being humble, or is there something else here at play? And I think to best answer that question, we need to do one more thought experiment. So let's pretend that after today you go home, you get back to your house, you sit on your couch, you look at your coffee table, and on your coffee table is this book. And it's titled Humility. Right? It's interesting that you have a book called Humility after this talk, but you do, and you open it up, and you read the foreword by the author. And the author, this is author number 1, says that, I believe the study of humility and the definition of it is really important. And therefore, I've dedicated the last 19 years of my life to studying what is humility. Some people would call me an expert on the subject. But the truth is there are thousands of experts on the subject of humility, and I am just one person. So therefore, I couldn't define humility, and I couldn't write this book. Right? And you open it up, and you flip through, and the book's actually blank. Like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So you go to bed. The next morning, you wake up. You sit back on your couch. You look at your coffee table. The book's there again, right? But this time, you open it up, and it's author number 2. And you read the foreword. This time, the author says the same thing. He says that, I believe the study of humility and the definition of it is really important. Therefore, I've dedicated the last 19 years of my life to studying it. And some people would call me an expert in this field of humility. And the truth is that there are thousands of experts. This is just one opinion. But I have the confidence that this opinion matters. So therefore, I've written this book, but read it with a grain of salt. This is just one man's opinion. You open it up, humility. He writes all about it. Okay, you go to bed, you wake up the next morning, you sit back down on your couch, there's another book. You open it up. This is author number 3. It says almost the same thing. It says, I believe the study of humility is really important. I've dedicated the last 19 years of my life to this field. Some people consider me an expert. And although there are thousands of experts out there, I'm actually the best. And this is the best book in the world ever written on humility. Right? You open it up, you read through it, there you are, humility. And so the question that we come back to is who is humble in these thought experiments? And I'd love to have that dialogue with you, but I'll just have to tell you my opinion now, which is in that 10th grade classroom, I don't believe we know if those students are humble or not because they're being shy, right? They're protecting themselves. So they may be humble, they may be confident, they may be arrogant, but we can't tell because they couldn't speak up. And I think when we look at the authors, the author who's really humble is, interestingly enough, the one who's also confident, and it's author number 2. Who believes that his opinion matters, believes that he is an expert, but also realizes that within the people around him there are other experts, right? There's one opinion amongst many. And this is really a core thing we look for at the Institute. We say we want to select entrepreneurs who are also confident in themselves to change the world, right? They will not settle for anything less. They're audacious enough to make claim that they can affect at least 1 million lives, at least, at bare minimum. They have that confidence. But at the same rate, they're humble enough to know that they can't do it alone, and they realize they won't be able to do this alone. They need exceptional teams, they need close mentors, and they need strategic partners to actually make this happen. And this is best illustrated by a philosophy that we have. We call it the Pygmalion Effect. And the story of Pygmalion is that there's an ancient Greek sculptor who set out to carve the most beautiful bust of a woman that had ever been crafted. Right? And so he got this big slab of marble and he started working on it. He worked on it for a year. And every single morning he'd wake up and he'd chisel away at the statue and he'd smooth it out. A year turned into 5 years. 5 years turned into 10 years. 10 years turned into 20 years. And after working on this statue of this woman for 20 years, eventually it became the most beautiful statue in the world to him, but eventually he actually fell in love with it. The idea with the Pygmalion Effect is that if you believe something enough in other people, they will manifest that, right? And so if you believe in the infinite potential of everybody around you, which is my definition of humility, they will rise to that occasion. But also, the paradox is that you can believe it in yourself as well. Right? If you believe in that you have infinite power as an entrepreneur and as an individual, you can rise to that. And so I believe that this kind of mesh of confidence and humility will lead this next generation of entrepreneurs to do a couple things. One is become pathologically collaborative, right? They will believe that they can change the world, that they can have massive impact and scale up large businesses, but they will also know that they can't do it alone. And with these tools of the internet, cell phones, social media, like never before, they will be collaborating and working together to tackle these issues. You know, notoriously in business, we have this symbol on everything. We copyright everything. We protect everything. We try to make it ours. I believe that the future of entrepreneurship will flip that around and will embrace a new philosophy of copyleft, once again realizing that we will not effectively address these issues unless we work on it together. Ultimately, this is the biggest belief that we have at the Unreasonable Institute, that business isn't business, that business is people, and that it's all about relationships. And so why I'm so excited to be here today is because I think I'm amongst a bunch of fellow misfits and entrepreneurs and innovators, and I really look forward to getting to know each of you a little bit better. So please feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you so much.